been watching some footage of me running around the Seville Marathon. Well, I'm pleased to report, as you could probably gather from the footage, that I actually managed to get my sub-3 target with my official chip time in the end of 2:56.53 with 2:57.20 on gun time. So made it on both counts. So I want to give a little bit of a wrap-up of how things went and a summary of the training, just wrap up this little series. So what happened in the last couple of weeks? So I started to taper from 2 weeks out and travelled to Portugal on Thursday, although the race is in Spain. We've actually got a place in Portugal about 100 miles away. So my wife was already out in Portugal with a few other family members. So it was kind of needed for me to go to Portugal first. So I had a sort of relaxing couple of days there, and we got the coach over from Seville to Seville, which is not a bad journey. Very cheap if they ever do it, €65 for the two of us, both ways. Took about 2.5 hours. And then training wise, I reduced my training to about 40 miles in the week before last, including a 10-mile easy run as my somewhat long run, inverted commas. I did a 10K marathon pace run and the usual Zwift workout Wednesday session, which is about 5K pace. And in the last week, it was a couple of rest days in there with some easy runs, short easy runs, and the only hard bit was the 5 miles marathon pace on Tuesday, which went pretty well. And on Saturday, I just got out after we'd been to the expo to collect my number for about 2 miles with a bit of a stretch out for probably around about a mile in my next percents to see how the race was. Now, it was actually quite nice weather in Seville, as you might imagine, far better than the rainy, miserable, cold weather we've got in the UK. So it was a bit of a temperature difference there. I certainly noticed that on the Saturday afternoon when I went out for the little shakeout. And after that, I thought, I've got a bit of a sore throat coming on. So in the end, I sort of just relaxed for the Saturday evening, didn't do a lot, especially because it's quite an early race. So the actual race started at 8:30 in the morning, but we had to make sure I was in the pen in the right time, because I got positioned in the 3 hour to 3:15 pen. So although it's obviously on chip time, I didn't want to start too far back because I wanted to make sure that my gun time wasn't maybe the wrong side of 3 and the chip time the right side of it. So I literally got into the pen and lined up at the front of the row of the 3 hour grid. And as we all sort of pushed forwards, I think I got my gun to chip differential was just under 30 seconds, so it wasn't too bad. I was over the line quite quickly. So temperature when the race started was about 10 degrees, very still conditions. It didn't feel cold, just standing up in my singlet and shorts. Literally, I did have to sort of actually stand up for half an hour. It gave time to a bit of mentally relax, and I chatted to a few people from that I knew from the Sub3 Facebook group, and also Krista from Zwift Runners. And then I met up with on the line with Paul Doyle, who I'd pre-arranged to sort of almost run with. He'd run 2:52 in Gloucester early in the year, but wasn't feeling quite on it this time. So he said he was quite happy to run a bit, sort of just a bit under sub-3 pace. I think we sort of settled on about 6:50 to 6:45 to 6:50 pace. So he was at the back of the 2:45 to 3 pen. So effectively we started together. So we ran virtually the whole race together actually, and it was. He said later that he felt that I was pacing him. I felt that he was pacing me for a long way. He had a couple of pit stops, shall we say, and I got away from him in the end. But it was great to actually run around with somebody who's so experienced of late in running sub-3 marathons. So we were right on the game there. So as for the race itself, well, here's a bit of a stats summary of all the splits. So I'm pleased to report that my pacing was basically spot on. We set off aiming to get the first mile in just under 6:50, and basically I think I got everyone under 6:50, and I've broken it down into sort of 5K splits. So these are all basically the official splits. Apart from the 40K split and the final time, a bit of a sore point was my chip failed. So if you've been tracking me on the race time tracker, it appeared I got to 35K and then sort of stopped, but it looks like my chip had failed. So a couple of days of negotiation and sending all the relevant info, and I got got my times nicely added on. So Yeah, so it's actually turned out to be a slight negative split. I got to halfway on chip time in 1:28:43, and I was feeling okay at the time. I think a bit of a struggling point between about 10 miles and halfway, where I felt starting to be a bit tired. It felt like a long way to go. But as you can see, all of my paces were pretty much within a second or two as I went around. So the first two 10Ks, they're just outside 42 minutes, and then the next two 10Ks just inside 42 minutes. So had it looks like a 33-second negative split, which is the first time I ever managed to do a negative split in a marathon. Maybe that's an indication that the first half was taking it easy. And as you can see from my positions there from the tracker, we started off being pulled sort of back. In fact, we took us a few miles to actually catch up with the sub-3 pacer. But actually, it sort of like I advanced to pretty much 400 places there from the end of the 5K to the end of the race, with a strong finish, overtaking almost 150 runners in the last 5 miles or so. Heart rate started off for me. My heart rate's pretty low these days, so average 136 for the race. Started off low 130. It's a bit of a drift up as the temperature rose and my effort rose. And the max at the end there was 153. Well, probably the real max is probably more like the sort of 146, because I think as I was coming to the end, I realised I had a bit more left in the tank, just sort of eke out a bit more of a pace. So up my pace there a bit on the last section. And I was also wearing the Stride footpod. Now, as the course was so flat, I didn't really use the Stride too much for pacing. But as you can see, all my power averages over the 5Ks were virtually identical, and I averaged 288. I previously worked out I needed to do about 290 power, but that's had very little air power, as you call it, so the effect of power from the wind, because there wasn't much wind, so that probably accounted for the slightly lower power than exactly I thought, although there was only 2 watts in it. And my cadence there averaged 183, maybe increased very marginally at the end. Obviously, I increased a bit as I got faster, but yeah, so it's a nice solid tempo for me. I sort of felt like my cadence roll was a bit too quick, so to get it just over 180 is probably about right. And also, of course, I was in the next percent shoes. So I think, in terms of pacing, that was great. I think the long number of marathon pace runs I did, the long runs all helped in the course. And of course, obviously, experience from previous marathons and knowing what I can do and what I can't. So another quick summary of my marathons. These are probably slides you've seen from previous videos, but just to call them out. So my aim in Seville, I think, was to get a 2:59, which would have equaled the age graded of the other 2 marathons apart from my best. So you can see that my age grading this time around was my second best ever at 79.64. Average pace of 6:45. A lot slower, obviously, than my first 2 when I was younger. But only 3.5 minutes or so slower than Treviso 4 years ago. But sort of near enough there to think that that's not an impossible time to get down to. Maybe if the winnings, if there was there. A couple of marathons that I entered, but I didn't quite make. But some of the stats from that marathons include in this analysis. So training summary, another just updated view of that. So I averaged 58 miles per week, excluding the last 2 weeks with the taper, which actually compared pretty similarly to my very first campaign when I did 238. Somewhat less than I did when I did my PB, and a bit less than I did 4 years ago. So maybe that was the difference between then and now. You've actually got my average training pace now. It's 20 seconds slower than it was 4 years ago, and only 1 heartbeat lower. So maybe that's an indication I'm not quite as fit as I was 4 years ago. But also I'd run a bit more miles then. So what did I do? I end up, a bit shorter long runs maybe this time. Only 7 long runs. 6 were sort of around about 20, 21, and 1 was the full distance. I did 10 marathon pace runs in training, right, and 25 interval sessions. Okay, this is an updated view of my mileage broken down in how many miles per week I did. So this time around, my most number of weeks was 9 at 50 to 59. But I did have a few weeks somewhat higher than that, 6 at 60 plus, and even 3 at 70 plus. So pretty good pretty good time there, and only 2 weeks where I had any downtime when I was injured around Christmas time. So for the shoe fanatics, here's my breakdown of my mileage per shoes for the last 26 weeks. By far the most amount of miles was done in the Turbo 2s. That's over 3 pairs, of which 2 are still going strong. Also, a lot of mileage in the next one. I did quite a few training runs in those, both on Zwift, on the treadmill, and a few ones outdoors as well. So yeah, I really did like those. Only downside was I pulled my hamstring on one of them, but I think I would have pulled my hamstring in any shoe when I was struggling after my fall in one of my runs before Christmas. And then the Pegasus GTX, that served me very well on some of the long time on feet runs when it was a bit wet on some of the old railways like the Downs Link. So I managed to get 241 miles in them, including 4 of the long runs of 20 plus miles. Did the marathon training run in the Turbo 2 Shields with the high top, which was a bit of an odd shoe, but it was very wet that day and I did that all on the road. So they kind of work for that just about, although they aren't great because there's not any laces in them, and for my narrow feet they don't feel like they get much of a lockdown, but they did the job, and they've also got those if it's a really wet day. I actually managed to get to 69 miles in the Zoomfly 3. I still think that's a terrible shoe, but I think I'm just wearing that one just to get a few miles in them. So I might still do a few miles in them from time to time. A couple of old pairs of 4%, did a few training runs, some on Zwift, some outdoors. So they came in useful still. Terracotta 5, didn't use them much. I did one long run in them, but they're quite a nice sort of low to the ground trail shoe. Not really obviously the cool order of the day for the marathon training. A couple of Hokas I tried, didn't really warm to that much, but still fairly new shoes. I got late in the campaign, so I didn't really want to sort of use them too much when I was sort of comfortable in other shoes, but I'll probably give those a bit more of a go. Brooks Launch 6 was my old go-to sort of training shoe before the Turbo 2. Haven't used that one much for a while. I've looked at the Launch 7, didn't look like it was overly exciting, poor review, so not sure I'll bother with that one. Ultra Boost, a couple of treadmill runs, a couple of cross-country races early in the campaign. I got some Adios 5 shoes, which I haven't really used much yet, but I'll be keen to give those a bit more of a go. I've actually recently got a pair of SL20 Adidas shoes, I don't know if you can see there, which I've just done 2 runs in, and I'm really liking them so far actually. So I used to wear the Adidas Bostons I like, so these SL20s are very like the Bostons, although the Bostons are still going, so I'll be keen to give those more of a go. Another view of the long runs, 22 long runs between 10 and 12 miles. Not so many more past that, but yeah, a decent one, and I got up to the one marathon training run of 26 miles. Recent races, obviously the top of the list there, the Seville Marathon. The only other race I've done this year was the Farnborough Half, which certainly it was a lot better run in Seville than the Farnborough Half, but the Farnborough Half at least tell me that it was actually worth running in the marathon. I had a very good part run on Christmas Day. That was my second best time last year, so the aim I think soon will be to see if I can nick under that 18 barrier again. Reasonable 10k just for that on a windy day. Some other park runs when I was in holiday in Norfolk, a couple of cross-country runs, and the Great South Run. I still think that the Great South Run was possibly the best run of all those ones, even perhaps better than the marathon, but it kind of showed perhaps that I could have perhaps pushed a bit more in the half than I was able to. The fitness at the time and my hamstrings at the time didn't really lend itself to being too cavalier, but showing that there's perhaps more in the tank. So all went well. Well, obviously the fact that I actually had a sub-3 target and I got it was obviously the main criterion. I think from previous campaigns I learned that you need to actually do a lot of long runs and do a lot of time actually at the marathon pace you want to run at. So I'd make sure I did that a lot this week. I didn't really have a training plan per se, but I had more of a routine, which was pretty much the same each week. So Monday I'd do Monday Run Club on Zwift or whatever was going on Monday, on the Zwift on the treadmill that is. I'd also go on to Wednesday on Zwift again to do the Wednesday workout, which is like typically 5k, 10k training. So it was giving that one day a week where I was going faster than the marathon pace, which I think is important for marathon pace or any training really, that you run faster than your goal pace at least once a week, just so that the goal pace doesn't feel like it's hard when you come to it. The other days in the week were sort of fairly easy runs, probably as many miles as I could get in. Saturday typically was my marathon pace day, and Sunday was my long run day. Used gels for the first time. I had 3 Morton gels in the race. I had one at 8 miles and one at about 15, just the normal non-caffeine ones, and I had one on the caffeine one at 21 miles. I'm not quite sure whether the caffeine ones actually made any difference or not. But I like the gels. They're like a very jelly type consistency. So I used to sort of just neck them down in 3 goes, have a sip, run for a bit, have the next second bit, and then have the third bit. So you sort of eat it over a minute or two. I think, as I said, obviously it's my 4th marathon and my 4th sub 4. Although obviously previously I don't think the sub 3 was really something in the back of my mind. I was trying to run a lot faster, but I had the experience from those campaigns, and obviously 40 years of a runner as well helps us sort of know how you work and what works best for you. I think I didn't try to be too ambitious. I mean, I went out halfway to like high 128. And I was a bit worried actually when I got to 128, but I think because all the other times I've slowed down a bit in the second half. But this time I think I was running in within myself, and I was just trying to run a really even pace. I think I was able to keep going. And I think once you get to a certain pace in any type of run, it's kind of easier to maintain it than to either speed up or even slow down. Sometimes you have to slow down, of course. But unlike any other race, like shorter races, you're not really out of breath in a marathon. So it's more a battle of the wheels to a certain extent. I enjoyed the process as ever of the training, and many thanks to my wife Sue, who came out diligently with me on pretty much all of my Sunday runs. We would drive out somewhere, circuit. We would have say a 20-mile run. So typically we would meet twice on the way and at the end, and she would have a gel and a bit of drink there for me, and just generally chum me all the way. Then we'd usually go for a pub lunch after. So really enjoyed those days. I think she'd probably be somewhere else, but I think we don't have to go to the beach hut, and if we go to Portugal, we'll do it there instead. But yeah, really, really great that Sue did that, and maybe she can do that in the next one, which hopefully won't be straight away. So, and of course, the next percent shoes, all the rage, of course, pretty much anyone who in the marathons in them or something similar these days. And I do have to chuckle though to myself, because this marathon was actually my 4th personal worst in them. The worst time I've ever done in any race. So that's the 5k track and the 5k row, the half marathon the race before, and this marathon. But having said that, of course, obviously I was somewhat faster and younger when I did those better times. So I think for me, you do feel like they help you run a bit faster. I've done some of my other videos where I've showed that there's some advantage. But I think the biggest thing for the marathon for me is that they're so cushioned for what is called a racing shoe that you just recover so much quicker. I did that 20-mile last run where I did the middle section at marathon pace, and normally if I'd done that on the road in, say, Adios or something like that, I'd been hobbling for a few days. But I was able to. I was a bit tired the next day, but I was able to do a run as normal. And even after the race, we went out in the afternoon for a little stroll, have a bit of a coffee and ice cream in Seville, and I was actually able to walk down the road without sort of hobbling and wincing. So in that sense, I think they really are great, and it'd be interesting to see what the other shoe companies come out with when we can actually get our hands on the shoes. I think the Brooks one's out yet, but not really having great reviews. But see what the Adidas one brings and the Saucony one, and see how that gets on. And what was not so good, well, obviously not great by falling over on that long run, and then I seemed to then maybe as a result got a hamstring pull shortly after, and then I got a cold. So basically I had 2 weeks. So I didn't actually stop running completely, although I had to have some days off, but I think those weeks were sort of like 30-mile weeks rather than sort of the 60, 70-mile weeks I was hoping for. But in a way, it did actually help, because I think I was potentially getting a bit stale. Maybe that's why I got a cold. And then when I started running again, the first run back, I felt really good. So sometimes, colds and little strains are a blessing in disguise, and maybe just telling you your body isn't quite there and it needs a bit of rest. And also, I think it actually gave me a bit of focus, because then I had to sort of refocus my energies, work out what I needed to do in the last 6 weeks, and get on with it. So not so good. I think, well, the Saturday and Sunday marathon pace, Sunday time on feet runs, I don't know, I'm not quite as fit and healthy and strong as I was 15 years ago. I think that was perhaps a bit of an ambitious. I felt often very tired on my Sunday long runs after Saturday marathon pace. So I think if I do a marathon campaign again, I think I'll probably do more often. I'll make the Sunday run with some marathon pace in it, but then have Saturday easier, just to make that long Sunday run a bit more meaningful. I think, the time on feet runs are good, but sometimes, I've seen a bit of talk from people that like to do their marathon pace in their Sunday runs. I never quite agree with that too much to an extent. So I think if you do that too often, it makes those runs so hard that you get to about middle of the week before you've recovered to run again. So there's always a bit of a trade-off with that sort of thing. And perhaps I think some of my easy runs, I think, various talk now, run your easy runs easy so you can run your hard runs hard. I think I'm learning that after all these years, but I still think perhaps some of my easy runs could be easier still. And as a compromise, I can make some of those steady runs in the week a bit longer. So take them out, maybe to a more half marathon pace if I can find the time. Still sort of around about 8-minute mile pace for me these days, but maybe make those easier runs more towards 8:30, because it probably doesn't have much of an aerobic benefit between the two. So what's next? Well, for the last week or two, we're just doing take it easy, no real targets. I haven't got any races coming up that I've entered. Makes me feel pretty good. The only thing that's slightly niggling me is my hamstring feels a bit tight. We're in for treatment on Tuesday. I keep up my regular treatments with body limits in near Milton Keynes with Mark Booth. He's the main man who's been keeping going for many years now, and also Lisa I see as well sometimes, and a few other guys there. So I've been doing a few runs. I was on Swift tonight, did the little 5K group run, bit of a little stride out towards the end, back up to marathon pace actually. And but just generally take it easy, having a few days off as I've needed. I've been working in London a bit this week, so just trying to hopefully avoid this virus and any other things. Oh, it's a bit of a nightmare. I'm so glad to get the marathon done really, because all the people with the London Marathon, these other spring marathons, going to be really uncertain to whether they're going to be able to go ahead, isn't it? So kind of glad in a way I can maybe sort of sit back and just watch that. Everyone else do their runs now, hopefully. So general targets, get back to some regular training, hopefully avoid injuries, touch wood, avoid any other viruses and stuff, but that's the luck of the gods sometimes, isn't it? Time targets, well, I always like to have a time target if I can. So I think immediately maybe a sub 18 part run again, see if I can inch it down to 17:57 that I did last year. I think my best part run ever is a 17 dead from Bushy Park, which is always a bit of a sore point, because I think if I'd have just found that extra 1 second somewhere, I would have been in a sub 17 club. But that was now 7 years ago, and I'm best part a minute behind. Is there any way I can get back to that? I would like to think so, but I think it's maybe a chance, but we really have to get the speed going. And I'm not sure my hamstrings could take it, given how they are recently. Another marathon. Well, I'm not really keen to just dive into another one. I think they say it takes so much out of me mentally and physically that I'm not sure I really want to do an autumn one. I know I've done an autumn one. I trained for one in Dublin. That's the one I ended up in hospital after crashing into a post. So maybe that's bad omens. But certainly I think now I've got like a good for age type time for any of the major marathons. Might look into some. Obviously London's is the obvious one because it's nearby, but kind of Boston appeals, but it's so expensive to get there. And then there's New York, which I never quite got to. So I've got to have a bit of time to decide whether I want to, which one I want to do next, if at all. Maybe it's just see how, get a bit of fun with my kind of preferred shorter distances, maybe get out on the track, do a few vets leagues again. And just don't enjoy training and see if I can use this fitness to run a bit quicker in some of these shorter ones. So I hope you found that all very interesting, and see you next one. Bye.